Good afternoon, YouTube. Today's demo is actually kind of cool. I wrote this document because I meet with a lot of customers, and they ask me what would be preferable, or what are the differences, or which should I use? And the question here is the differences between OpenShift routes or using custom resource definitions. And there's really no right or wrong answer. It's really just your preference. We've worked really hard within CIS to build a similarity or create a similar environment between using OpenShift routes and using CRDs. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about what those are. I'm also going to show you the differences and highlight some of the caveats between one or the other solution. And then once you're aware of that, then it's up to you to determine maybe which one works best for your environment. That's because every environment is different, and there could be pros and cons. So OpenShift routes is really used mostly for OpenShift. And so in my OpenShift environment, this is a brand new OpenShift environment. It happens to be OpenShift 4.9.5. And if I go down to routes, as you can see, there's nothing. But what I have done is I do have a couple pods configured. So of course, coffee, mocha, and tea. And going back to my diagram, you can see I've got coffee, mocha, and tea. I've got those deployed. And what I'm also going to start with is, you can see there, coffee, mocha, and tea. There's 3 pods of each. I'm just going to change to kube system. And what I also have is I've already deployed CIS, and specifically CIS for routes. So we'll take a look at that in this video. But having routes and having CRDs, you cannot have them working together. They won't work together. That's why the first example is check for routes, and then I'm going to restart CIS for CRDs. They are really independent, and they won't run on the same CIS. So that's really important. You can have them in the same cluster, but you're going to have 2 instances of CIS watching 2 different namespaces, right? So maybe routes watching one namespace, maybe CRDs watching a different namespace. That you can do, but you cannot have them running on the same CIS. In my diagram here, CIS is going to plumb big IP, configure big IP with either the route or the CRD for these backend services. I am only going to use one public IP. So my public IP is always going to be cafe.example.com. It's the same public IP. It's not going to change. And that's because OpenShift routes, the public IP is configured globally. And of course, my backend application is coffee, tea, mocha, and I'm going to monitor those using the big IP. Traditional environment. So I already deployed CIS. I want to just call out a few things. So the first thing is this route vserver ADR command. This is going to be the public IP address on big IP. So if we go to big IP, that's always going to be that public IP on that device. And it will be hard-coded. When you go in here, you can actually see there is that public IP. So that is created for you, even though I have no pool members. I have some kind of mocha still there. Okay, so that's no problem. Remove that. But got some pool members there, so you can see that public IP is there, and that IP is there as well. So that's that is kind of like once this gets created. And so let's take a look at some of the other options. So there's your virtual IP. You're gonna enable manage routes as true. You're gonna set up your OpenShift partition, and on big IP you can see that I am using OpenShift partition. I'm using the namespace default, and the reason why is because there's a lot of namespaces there. So by using default, I am doing namespace isolation. CIS is only watching those namespaces. Another option is to use route labels. Please tune or cherry pick or prune what CIS needs to watch. Don't let CIS watch every single service. There's way too many services now deployed by default inside OpenShift. The services are quite large. If I go to default, you can see there's 4, but if I do all projects, yeah, right? There's no reason why CIS needs to watch all these projects, right? So prune the project for what you need CIS to watch, right? Really important. So manage, and then of course, I am using a CNI. I am using OpenShift SDN. It's default, and so there's my OpenShift SDN, and that's my VXLAN profile. So that's really important for the FDBs and the ARP entries. And then I'm going to be using AS3 override. This cafe override here. One of the reasons why I want to use the override is to allow my deployment to use non-exposed objects in an annotation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like in a minute. So this is my CIS arguments for OpenShift routes. CIS is already deployed. So I deployed my Kubernetes secret, and then you really only need these 2 files, right? And this cluster role binding, which pretty much has everything in it, you can find it in my repo, or you can pull it down from Cloud Docs. And then of course the CIS deployment. So let's take a look at the use case. So the use case here is to do edge termination, to do redirect from HTTP to HTTPS, to do health monitoring for the host name of cafe.example.com, path, coffee, tea, and mocha. I want to do an X4 so I want to introduce a custom header. So therefore, I need to use a custom HTTP profile. And in OpenShift routes, I need to use an override. And then the backend's listening on port 80. So how does this look like if we look at an example of T here? We can see we're using routes. There's the name, there's the namespace, there's the annotations. So these are the annotations that are very specific. The first annotation is to do edge termination, which I've specified down here, edge termination, as part of my TLS spec. Then I'm doing a redirect. Then I have a health monitor, and the health monitor is monitoring T, and there's the host name. There is the specific host name to match on, and there is the path of T, backend port, and service. Now, because I wanted to do X4, there is no annotation. There's no annotation to do custom policy. So what you can do with OpenShift routes, we can use a feature called override. And what override does is it uses a config map, and CIS merges all of this logic into an AS3 declaration and publishes it to big IP. So to do that, you can configure one override. That is the name of the override. And then all of your logic is configured under this override under the name of the virtual server. And it works well because you only have one virtual server. And that one virtual server is HTTPS_OSE virtual server. And there is the custom profile. You can add anything here that goes under the virtual. TCP profiles, custom profiles for TCP. You can do stuff like WAF, bot, DOS, login, etc., etc. There's many. And it's just an AS3 JSON, right? It's an AS3 JSON in the config map. So these two get created together. And if you can see in my routes configuration, you can kind of see here they are. Here is the override right there. So please fork my repo, copy my files, because they're very clean. I've done all the testing, spent 2 days doing the testing. No reason to recreate the testing again. Just clone this repo, copy the files, and let me know if there's anything if there's any questions you have. So here's my route, for example. So I'm going to create these 3 routes in this environment. So let's go ahead and do that, and we will create the routes. And let's go to the dashboard under network. So there might have been a legacy route that from my testing earlier on that was there, but so let's go and take a look. Okay, so we've got the 3 routes. I've already created the config map. The config map I created earlier on. I created this AS3 override config map earlier on. And there's no reason for me to touch it. I could just leave it there since I'm doing routes. But let's go ahead and do OC create -f. Let's create coffee first. There you can look at that. It got populated right away. Wow, that's really cool. And you can actually see there's the route. And what's really cool is that the route's actually been accepted. So based on the 200 OK coming back on the API, the route was actually accepted. Let's see, there might be a little, yeah, there's the code 200 OK that came back right there, which actually populates the status of being accepted. And what's really cool about routes is you can actually just connect to it, right? You can see there coffee, there's coffee right there, remote IP. That's actually the IP address of the pod itself. It's actually the remote IP that's actually coming through. That's actually really cool. 2.60, this is actually the outside interface of the box of Big IP because it's snatted to that interface. So that's self IP. So I really kind of like that. I don't have any. I can put the proxy protocol, which will then expose the real IP. You could do that if you want, or if you could expose that using XFF. But one thing you can see it here is that you can actually see the custom profile right there. So it's added. That's pretty cool. And so let's go ahead and add that's the API that I'm watching. Let's go ahead and add T. And let's go ahead and add Mocha. And so there's the three routes, as you can see right there. Bam, 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 all configured. Very, very, very clean. Very clean on the routes. All moving to the same partition. And as you can see, they're all here as well. So we can connect to Mocha. And there's Mocha. And we can connect to T. So that's really smooth. And if we go look at one of these routes, we could actually go in here. And you could actually look. You could actually see the annotations. There are the annotations for the client. There's the annotations for the health monitor. It's actually really clean. The TLS configuration is down on the bottom, and then there's some of the default route logic at the bottom there as well. So it's really clean. You could actually also edit the route through here as well. Or if you really want to do and keep control of source of truth, then maybe you want to edit your route in your YAML file and then store it in Bitbucket and then kind of like approve it that way and then kind of push it out. Many different ways that you can do this. But this is very clean. Let me just stop this auto refresh from happening here. And so as you can see that with routes, everything is cafe.example.com. So your domain, your host name is always the same for all of your routes. To routes. And as you can see right there, all of the routes is cafe.example.com. So, and then it's just the path. So we're doing load balancing based on the path. So if we go here and we go down to resources and you go down, you can actually see the path. There you go. There's tea, mocha, and coffee. And you can actually see that it actually sends you to the different paths at the back end based on the request. I can actually click on this and you can actually see it. So there's the host of any example.com request with index T, and then you send to the T service. So you see we pool members. We got 3 pool members, and kind of breaks out. It's very clean, very, very, very clean, very stable. It's come a long way. I'm really happy with this OpenShift Routes. This is 4.9.15, 2.7.1. Super clean, super smooth. So I'm really happy. So that is the routes, and we kind of talked a little bit about this. We kind of talked about the dashboard. We talked a little bit about the configuration on Big IP, and of course the traffic. The only disadvantage here is the lack of custom annotations. It's the only thing, right? There is so many policies, profiles, potential objects that users want to add, that to create annotations, it would require so many annotations, right? And so to try and keep this simple, we don't really want to be in the business of creating annotations for every single object, and just for the ones that are important, because, we're not only dealing with routes. There's ingresses, there's CRDs, there's config maps, etc. If you really want to create everything, and you really want to go customize, then you have to go config map, because you can do everything in AS3, because AS3 allows you to expose objects into anything. And the AS3 override really simplifies that. Anything that's under the virtual server can be added. So that's kind of cool. And so that's the only limitation. The other limitation is that you can only create one virtual IP per CIS instance, right? And so it's at least in 2.7. So in 2.7, you can only create one virtual. Now in 2.8, we're going to change that. So come March timeframe, we're going to have a preview. If you want to talk about it, please let me know, because we're building it right now. But in 2.8, CIS will allow you to create multiple virtuals for OpenShift routes. We're going to refactor the entire route engine. But it's all under the covers. You're not going to notice any change. So that's routes. Now, what happens if we go ahead and try to do the same thing, but with CRDs? How does it look like? And CRDs is maybe somewhat new to you, and maybe, well, okay, I want to know a little bit more about how I'm going to use CRDs, and why would I want to use CRDs, and what's the difference? And does CRDs mean that I have to have a different public IP per CRD? Well, let's go and take a look. Before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean up. So if you just bear with me for a minute, I am going to remove all my routes. So if you can see, I just cleaned up. I cleaned up the routes. Let's see here. Go back to routes. Refresh this. No more routes. And I'm going to go into routes, CIS. And I am going to, well, I keep on liking to use Kubernetes, but it's the same thing. Oopsie, I can't spell. And let's remove the controller. Okay, now what I'm going to do, this is my source of truth. I'm actually going to go one more. Oopsie. And I'm going to actually change to custom resource definitions. So with custom resource definitions, the first thing that I need to do is to take a look at the CIS deployment, which I'm going to start. OC create -f. Okay, so let's take a look at the deployments here. And I'm going to change the deployment to kube system. As you can see, there is the deployment. And what I can actually do is I can actually log that deployment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm actually going to log it. So how I log it is I do oclog -f deploy, and then I can do some interesting stuff here with the characters, which is actually kind of cool. So I can actually see the AS3 API. So you can actually see that nothing's actually being deployed right now. It's pretty quiet. CIS is not hammering away at using the AS3 API. It's very quiet. There's no CRDs. The CIS is just watching. So for CRDs, the benefit of using CRDs is there's no limitation on how many public IPs, virtual servers, I can create on BigAP. I can create as many CRDs. Each CRD can have its own virtual IP. However, we want to maintain some similarity with routes. We want to do host header load balancing, determine the backend application, specifically for tcoffee and Mocha. We want to use the same IP address, same public IP, and same FQDN, cafe.example.com, because that's the use case, right? And I want to create three CRDs. And how do I do this? So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to change the custom mode resource to true, right? This is so that I'm using CRDs. This is the OpenShift tenant that we manage in the CRDs. And then, of course, here's my CNI. Same CNI. I don't have to change my CNI because it's the same. And you can see the difference here. Notice that here I don't have to specify globally what my virtual server IP is. So my big IP should be completely blank. It's clean because I don't have to configure anything globally. It's so much cleaner. So I don't have to configure that and worry about the global configuration like I had to do with routes. So there is my configuration. That's basically the one item there. And then the second item is to create it. And so let's go take a look at the use case. So it's going to be exactly the same use case. Edge termination, redirect HTTP to HTTPS, health monitoring using nginx application on the back end for cafe.example.com/path, coffee, tea, and mocha. We're also wanting to do a custom policy, listen on the back end for a different port. So unlike OpenShift Routes, CIS can reference dedicated CRDs for specific tasks. Yeah, this is really cool. So we have a couple of CRDs. One of the CRDs being external DNS, that's to Plum GTM. Another CRD is a policy or a profile CRD. It's called policy CRD, as well as TLS. So what's nice here is you can create one TLS with your certs or one policy with your policies and reference them in the parent. So these are children, and this is the parent. So you can see here is my virtual server, here's my TLS profile, and here's my policy CRD. These are individual CRDs that you would create. And you can see here, I have the hostname of cafe.example.com. I am specifying the virtual IP, or you can use IPAM. So here you can use the IPAM controller, where with OpenShift Routes, you cannot use the IPAM. It does not work. So here is my TLS profile. This is the parent referencing the child. So I'm referencing the TLS profile. That's the name. Here is the policy where I'm referencing the child. I'm referencing Cafe Policy. And what Cafe Policy is doing, it's doing every single object that I want to potentially configure. And this is actually we're actually going to grow this. This is going to be quite cool. Here you can do TCP, HTTP, login, WAF, bot, dot, iRules, anything that you want that's under the virtual server is going to be enabled through the policy CRD. And that's its goal. So we keep these virtual servers pretty simple, and maybe this becomes like a system policy or a global policy or a compliance policy. And it's the same thing with TLS. If Edge, you can specify to refer to big IP or to refer to secret. You can do that, and you can create as many of these as you want. These are individual. And this is kind of how they get added. Now, Mark, you might ask me, what is host group? Host group was created in 2.7. What host group allows you to do is reuse the IP address. So basically, it's a shared IP across big IP, and it allows you then to do host header load balancing. So basically, host group is similar to routes, where we're reusing this host name, we're reusing this IP. You might go, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, well, let's go take a look. So if I go to my repo, and if I go and change to custom resource definitions, I go into my CRDs, you're going to see here's T, notice, virtual server T, cafe group. Let's go take a look at Mocha, same virtual IP, same, and it's that cafe group that is what's creating that logic. That is what's ultimately sticking these things together. So this is really cool. And then of course your path is what's different here. So the path is where you get the differentiation, right? That's what creates the difference here. So that is huge, that host group. And then you can see here, there's the T and there's the backend, If we look here, this is very simple, default namespace. These labels are true because if you change these labels to false, it removes the object from big AP, and it can stay there. So you can, if you're going into maintenance, you just want to flip the label, change to false. Termination of edge, there is my reference of my cert, it's my host name. Host name needs to be the same as this. If they're not the same, it's going to complain. And of course, here's my policy and my custom HTTP policy. So very, very, very important. When you're doing CRDs, you must create and load the custom resource definition schema. The schema is important because that's what CRDs are doing. Kubernetes is validating the CRD against schema. And so if something doesn't match the schema, it's going to get rejected. And so that's actually kind of cool. You have to go based on the schema. The schema is for schema validation within Kubernetes. We also do AS3 validation as well. So we kind of do both, but schema validation is really important. It will not, if your schema is not loaded, you're not going to see your virtuals being populated. So what I can do now is literally I can go in and I can create all of these, and this will actually start to create, I can create my TLS edge, my coffee, and notice these three here are just referencing these two profiles. So let's go into Kubernetes and do this. I'm going to change to the directory structure and CRDs. And as you can see, I created the CRDs. Now I'm going to go, you can take a look here. You can see there's the updates and there's the last update. So there's the three on the, and so the API, you can kind of see how the API works. It configures the API. You can see there's the success. I can go take a look at Big AP. Notice one virtual server. It's a very different name. It's just basically, it's a CRD underscore, and you can customize this name if you want. And if you look here at the policy engine, you can actually see policies are somewhat similar, very similar to OpenShift Routes actually. And you can actually see the pool members are here, and slightly different. It's just got the name in front, and of course, I can actually now go and keep on refreshing this traffic. You can see how it's updating right there. I can refresh this traffic there. This is for mocha, and of course this is for coffee. There we go. So coffee, tea, and mocha. You can see how I'm bouncing amongst the different servers, amongst the different environments there. And of course I'm doing cookie persistence. So it's just kind of there by default. So I'll just turn this guy off. We'll keep on going. Perfect. Now, you might ask me, where can I see the CRDs in the UI? Let me go down to routes. Ingresses? Nowhere. Let me change to defaults. This is disappointing. There's the services are there, but there's no option currently in the OpenShift dashboard to see the CRDs. So that means I got to use a CLI. That's not so cool. So I can, it's a very simple command. I put it in here. And so it's going to kind of show a lot, but let's go and take a look. So you can ignore all the schema. This is schema stuff. I wish it didn't show. Maybe you can grep for it out. But you can actually see here that here is actually my virtual server for mocha, for coffee, mocha, and tea. Same TLS edge, same redirect, same IP, same time. There is my cafe policy. And then I can describe any one of these. And in fact, I can edit any one of these. Right? I can edit it. It's actually quite easy to manage, but I'm managing this through Kubernetes because there is no hook into OpenShift. Whether there will be a hook or not, I don't really know. But that's a shame. If anybody knows how to get CRDs in the UI of Red Hat, please let me know. I'd love to know. And so you can kind of see it there. So it gets back to the question about let's go back up to the diagram. Back up to the diagram here about the differences. So the one benefit of using OpenShift Routes is that, of course, you get the dashboard, right? If you don't necessarily care about the dashboard, then, maybe it's not a big deal. The other benefit, maybe you can click on the link, that the route has been deployed versus going into the CLI. It's really just the management at that point. But the power of CRDs is actually pretty cool. So that's really what I wanted to show you, the difference between the route using quite legacy annotations, right? If you look at it here, it's almost like JSON inside YAML, right, with annotations. These are very specific, very custom annotations. If you make a mistake, it's not going to work. So potentially the lack of annotations, right, which requires you to use a override, versus going to an approach where you're moving towards 100% YAML and quite powerful capabilities where you can go and use a parent versus and a child relationship and kind of mix and match. And so why this is so cool is because policy CRD is new in 2.7, as well as this host group 2.7 and a host group cafe or host group whatever. It's kind of build this combination. These are all new in 2.7, and this is what's allowing us to create the similarity and give you folks, as deploying this, the option of kind of picking and choosing kind of what works for you. So I hope this video is beneficial, and I'm hoping that you can use this content. And there are other examples that I have documented here. As you can see, this is the new one. And so please go ahead and like, subscribe. I'm trying to grow this channel. I'm trying to share this content to get, obviously, more cool stuff in here. And there's a lot of cool stuff to come. I've got a big laundry list of stuff that I want to document. But if there's something that you urgently need, please let me know, or let one of your sales colleagues know that can reach out to me so that I can create that content. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful afternoon.